Hello and welcome to the video on what can go wrong. And what we're talking about here are sampling designs. Sampling designs. Okay? So when I mean what could go wrong, that's bad sampling designs and bias. So let's just do a quick review on the four sampling designs that are acceptable. SRS, which is our best choice, our stratified sampling, cluster, and we have systematic. Now, I didn't talk about multi-stage, but basically if you incorporate these two, we call it multi-stage. Or I should say these three. Or if you incorporate any two, or it's multi-stage. Okay, but we don't necessarily worry about that too much. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of bad sampling designs. Voluntary response sample. Okay, this is when you take a voluntary sample, and it's basically just a large group of individuals invited to respond, and all that who respond are counted. So you see this a lot of time on TV polls. On TV polls, okay, they ask a question and people call in. Okay, especially during elections, you'll see that a lot. And if you pay attention to any of the news, you got Fox and say MSNBC. So if you ever go here, the people that tend to go that way, and the people here tend to go this way. So you can see it's just voluntary. People are just volunteering. Another thing that you should know about voluntary response sample. Say you're driving down the road and you're listening to the radio, and they ask for people to call in about a certain uh, survey about a particular subject, um, on whatever, on any subject. So usually people with strong opinions tend to call in. So this creates a bias. It's called voluntary response bias. Okay, so make sure you read up on this in the book. Voluntary response bias is when you're volunteering people to call in. Okay, the next is convenience sample. Okay, this is we simply include the individuals that are convenient to us. And it's bad because this group may not be a representation of the population. Okay, for instance, I could be in my class and I don't want to get a sampling frame of the school. I don't want to get the sampling frame. I want to find something out about my school, and I just use my class. I just use my class. Okay, this is not good. Okay, it creates a bias. In this case, it would be an overestimate of, well, it depends on what I'm asking for. For example, I could say, okay, well, I want to know how tall everybody is in my school. So that's a mu. Okay, I want to know how everybody's. So I use my class. Now I don't know. I could have a lot of tall people. I could have a lot of short people, but it's really not a good. It's not a good sample. It's not a good design. Convenience sampling. Okay, it's like, let's say I want to know something about women and women's shopping habits. Okay, and I set up shop at the mall, and I go to the mall and hand out surveys. Okay, what do you think? Good or bad? Okay, this is not good. It's convenient. Okay, so hopefully everybody could see voluntary response and convenience. It's pretty self-explanatory. Um, these are bad sampling designs, and when you get down to it, your results, when they get done with this voluntary response and they have a sample, okay, the question is, does this sample represent the population? Okay, most often than not, it is a no. Okay, you can't really be sure. There's no randomization in there. Okay, let's go to some types of bias. Okay, here's some types of bias that just could go wrong with any sample. This could be any design. Okay, these could happen with any design, whether good or bad. So non-response. This bias is created when those who were surveyed don't respond. Those who don't respond may differ from those who did. Okay, so you could do an SRS. You could do an SRS and you can get people who don't respond. This is probably one of our biggest problems that we combat, people who don't respond. So one way to get around this, instead of doing large surveys, okay, large surveys tend to get more non-response. Okay, so we want to limit this, make them make them smaller surveys, and try to pinpoint so where we could get more more people answering us back. Okay, the next one, which is somewhat harder to see, and this has to do with our sampling frame, but this occurs when some portion of the population is not sampled at all or has a small representation in the sample than it has in the population. Okay, so for example, if I was surveying U.S. adults, or I was interested in something with U.S. adults, okay, so this is my population. So basically, I wanna, let's say adults. Let me just make it a little bit more smaller so you could see it a little better. U.S. adults in Orlando. Okay, so I may obtain a list. Let's say I get an SRS. So I obtain a list, okay, of all adults. Okay, and then what do I call that list again? That's called a sampling frame. Sampling frame. Okay, so we have some big problems here because now I'll say, well, how am I going to contact these people? Well, let's say we'll mail. Okay, so we'll mail the survey out. Survey out. Okay, so what would undercoverage be? Okay, so what portion of this list, okay, will we not? Okay, so now since I'm going to mail it out, I'm going to get a list of all adults, okay, who have a home or slash apartment. So this is my sampling frame. Okay, if I'm going to do the adults in Orlando and I'm going to mail something out, I need a list of all adults who have a home. Okay, so who would be undercovered here? Because this is my population, all U.S. adults. So I'm missing out on homeless people. Homeless. Okay, they may respond differently. They may respond different. Okay, and that goes. There's more. It could be this, and I could be contacting people by phone. What happens if somebody doesn't have a phone? There's a certain percent of the population that don't have a phone. Am I going to call them by cell phone? Am I going to call them by landline? Okay, a lot of people don't have landlines. Okay, you could look those statistics up about the percentage of younger people who have home phones. It's basically non-existent. Okay, so read about these two biases in the book. And another bias is response bias, and that's results when anything in the survey design influences the responses. This happens a lot when in the questioning, in the questions in surveys. Okay. Sometimes you want to do a pilot study to see. You want to do a pilot study to kind of get a feel of what everybody's saying, and then reword your questions. Make sure that they're not favoring one answer or another one. Okay, and really, 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 really important. It's always very good to to design ahead. Design ahead. Okay. Sampling methods are very tricky because once you have a bad sampling method, okay, or you have a bad question, there is no way to recover. There's no way to recover from a biased sampling method, okay, or a survey that asks biased questions. Once you have a bad sample, you cannot switch it around and make it a good sample. It's done, okay? The only way to do it is to start over. Is to start over. Okay, that's why it's very important. These companies that do these surveys, this is a big. They study this. Okay, a big one's the Census Bureau, the census. Okay, they study these surveys and they get it down to a science because they know once they have a bad sampling design, there's no way to recover, and you lose a lot of money. Okay, it's really, really a big deal to plan ahead, know your bias, know what's happening, make sure you're sampling correctly. Okay, so that's basically it. Make sure you read this chapter. This stuff is very, very important. Okay, thanks for watching.